Thank you for tuning into the Devy Devotional Podcast, a monthly show focusing on Devy prospects, strategies, and incoming rookies. Now here's your host.
Welcome into the Devy Devotional, where we stay devoted to Devy. I'm your host, Dynasty Coach A, joined as always by Aaron Wilcox at Aaron Wilcox86 on Twitter. And tonight we're going to be venting. We're going to be getting some stuff off our chest. You know, we're sick of hearing all these damn narratives, and we just want to, we're going to dispute them. We're going to argue about them. We're going to vent. Like I said, we have some pet peeves we're going to go over. It's just a way of just getting it all out there, starting fresh and moving on during this like lull of the off season. But first, how are you doing, Aaron?
I'm doing well. This was just a topic that strays a little bit from what we normally go over, right? We're very heavy into the player analysis, and yes, we talk about some situations, and we'll definitely delve into, rookies in addition to the Devy and C2C talk. But I think that this is going to be an interesting shakeup from what we normally talk about. And hopefully not only do we complain a little bit, right, about some of the pet peeves and narratives that are out there, but hopefully offer some solutions or just different ideas or concepts today too. So yeah, I'm excited for today.
Yeah, I love it. Honestly, I said it last time. We're running out of ideas this time of year. There's not too much you can do. You can only do so many mock drafts. You can only talk about the 2025 class for so long, until we start getting some more players playing and all that kind of stuff. So this is a good idea, with going over that Aaron came up with, just kind of going over some of the narratives that we hear, like sometimes it's just widely accepted as, yeah, I mean, you got to do it. And sometimes when you actually sit down and think about it, take a second, maybe it's not the right call. Maybe it is normally, but maybe it's not the right call for your team or, whatever it might be. So there's definitely a lot of times where we can actually, sit down and think about stuff. So that's what we're going to be doing tonight. Toronto Dave's in the chat, of course. Drake May, Josh Downs, you got to love it. Toronto Dave knows how to get on there. All he has to do is talk about my boys, and he's going to get on the show. But Aaron, it was your idea, so I'm sure you have some good ones. Why don't you go ahead and start us off with either a pet peeve or a narrative or whatever you want.
Sure thing. And I appreciate that, Dave. As tempting as that is to get into the Josh Downs, Drake May talks, I don't think that's going to be our first topic tonight. But one thing that most of us Dynasty or Devy or C2C managers see, especially if you're out there on social media, especially Twitter, you'll see just the phases on these draft classes. So the narrative just continues to change. Next year's draft class is way better than this year's. And then, oh, wait, this class next year is actually starting to become overrated. And then people are like, no, it's actually sneaky good. And it's just a cycle of next year's is always better. Let's trade out for 2024, then eventually be 2025. Because have you seen Nick Singleton? And I don't love that. Or actually, no, 2024 would be. Wait, Nick Singleton, no, 2025. I don't know what I'm talking about. But anyways, ultimately, I just don't love that kind of up and down approach. It's not like anything changed overnight with the class, but it just depends on how we're feeling, what we've scouted recently. One guy drops down in the ranks, like the fall of Kayshon Boutte this offseason, and then people start panicking and saying, wait, it's not a very great top-end wide receiver class. I just don't think that we should be quite so reactive. So that might be part of why there is that eternal optimism for the future and always overrating the next class. But what do you think there, John?
Yeah, it's so easy, and it happens every time. Oh, sorry, my daughter was talking to me through the Google, but yeah, so it happens every time. It seems like I haven't been in the Devy game as long as you, but I have been in playing Dynasty, and obviously there's a little bit of everything with that. So we have the rookies, and every year it's just like, oh, the next one's good. 2020 was terrible beyond like a couple running backs, and we didn't know who the best running backs were and like all that kind of stuff. And then guess what? Everyone was really good. And then 2021 came, and it was the same thing. It was like just like, no, this draft sucks. This draft sucks. And guess what? Everyone was really good. And Even this past year, I mean, I know you and I pretty much agree more than most people agree in like the Devy space. I would assume, like, obviously not all the time, and definitely not about Luther Burden, but I mean we agree quite a bit. And you see it when we do our mock drafts and stuff like that. Like we end up taking each other's players, and then it's like, well, we've run out of players because we've taken all the good ones. But like last year, I was one of the biggest proponents of this is a good draft class. And people were just like, the 2022 is a terrible draft class. Like just god awful, terrible draft class. And I kept saying, no, look at these wide receivers. Look, we have some running backs. No, it's not the greatest, like high end depth and all that kind of stuff. But those wide receivers really made the class. Now, I was also higher on Matt Corral and Sam Howell, so I had some QBs in there that I liked as well, which obviously not everyone does, and unfortunately, we didn't get too many answers with that because Howell only played one game, and technically he's a starter now, and then Corral got hurt right away. But the point of the story is like every single person I heard was just talking about how terrible the 2022 class was. Trade all of your picks after 103, get to 2023. And guess what? Now we're hearing the same exact stuff, Now, but go back and think about how good the 2022 class was. There obviously there were some picks that didn't work out. Like if you took Sky Moore in the first, that was your own damn fault. But even then, like Trey McBride didn't work out, that year. The stuff like that, like that stuff's always going to happen. But think about how many solid, amazing wide receivers at the very least. And then you still had your Brees Halls, your Kenneth Walkers. Rashad White came on towards the end. Now he's the starter in Tampa Bay. Like there was some very good players in that draft. And yet it was a terrible draft class. Now you're starting to hear the same thing about 2023. And I could sit there and go on and on and on. Do not trade your first round picks for 2024 picks. Just don't do it. Like, I mean, as a general rule of thumb, obviously, if there's some reason to do it, but get something on top. Like, you have to get something on top in order to make it worth it. Otherwise, you're just pushing it down the line. And if you're pushing it down the line, you're doing Dynasty or Devy or whatever wrong.
Yeah, right, right. You got to take advantage of having to wait another year and the uncertainty of a draft class that could fall off or just never quite step up the way you expect. So I'm glad that we're on the same page with that narrative. And let's see, what did Toronto Dave say in the chat? I faded this 2022 class way too much. And you know what? You're not alone there, Dave. I think a lot of people did. Not to say everybody did, right? So some people are going to be listening to this. They're like, hey, I liked it. And you're smart to have liked it for sure, or at least liked certain parts of the class. So that's one narrative that came to mind. I think that another one is just who who's next up, or who is the next blank. So for example, who is the next great Clemson quarterback? Oh, it's got to be DJU is going to be just as good as Trevor Lawrence, or Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, Hurts did it, Rattler's the next superstar, ignoring kind of some of the, I mean, there were significant concerns with Rattler, not necessarily even analytically as much as just character wise, like just things that we were ignoring. And then I don't know, the running back stuff and the wide receiver stuff especially kind of irks me. For example, vacated targets. Like I just don't know that we can always expect these wide receivers just to step in for these great guys who leave. So for example, when the Clemson wide receivers started to clear out of there, who's going to be the next star Clemson wide receiver? Is it Joe Ngata? Is it Frank Ladson? Is it EJ Williams? Well, it was ultimately none of them. And none of them really broke out at a young age or did that well as prospects. Or maybe Minnesota after Tyler Johnson and Rashad Bateman. Everybody was very eager to have that next stud. And sometimes it just doesn't happen. And the same can be said for the running back position. So I think that narrative gets a little bit old. I think we should go more towards player analysis compared to just blindly following the schools. Now, there is a caveat, right? Alabama, I mean, they're just the studly recruits every single year. There's going to be probably some studs coming out of there each season. Same with the Ohio State wide receivers. So those are exceptions to the rule that you have to exploit. But for the most, and Lincoln Riley quarterbacks, to be fair, are usually a pretty good bet, right? But there's a lot of other people out there who are like, you got to get this Iowa State running back. He's going to be the next Brees Hall. And I just don't know that we should be propping up guys just based on that.
No, I agree. The helmet scouting is gone way too far, and it's kind of perfect because I was trying to think of what what we should talk about, like what one of my narratives would be, and and you kind of worked your way right into it, and at least the second part there, and it's like I'm even at fault here because in my latest C2C article that's coming out on DLF on Saturday, so it's not out yet, but it will be out soon. I talked about like drafting Bama and Ohio State players. Like you have a good shot of hitting by doing that. But guess what? You also have a really good shot of them never seeing the field. And so I think that while it it can be very fruitful if you do hit on those players, and and if you figure out who the best players are going to be at those schools, it could be very, very helpful. But if you end up having your Keon Grays and like in those kind of players that they're never going to see the field, or they're going to have to transfer out, and then if they transfer out, was it because they suck, or is it just because they were behind MHJ and and Emike Egbuka and whoever else? Even with Alabama, we saw this year that we had Jermaine Burton coming over. He's going to be amazing because he's at Alabama, and I mean, we were both there saying at the beginning of the season, like, I don't think Jermaine Burton's all that great. And yet, he was going to Bama, so all of a sudden he became like a top 5 Devy wide receiver just because he was at Bama. And guess what? He sucked. He wasn't good. So I think that it can actually hurt you when you're doing that helmet scouting a little too much. Now, every once in a while, you might find that diamond in the rough just because Alabama helmet scouted. But how many times are you going to have a player sitting on the bench for 2 or 3 years? On your Devy squad, especially where that's really killing you. Maybe C2C, it doesn't hurt you as bad. You have 50-man rosters. Okay, this guy can sit on the bench for 3 years. But for a Devy squad, if you have Jace McClellan, for instance, okay, well, what the hell has he done for me? And we can't even guarantee he's going to be an NFL player at this point.
Yeah, no, I like the points that you made there. And we're not telling people not to take a shot on guys who are kind of unknown. There's going to be those unknowns that are going to break out when they come into Alabama. We've talked about Malik Benson, for example, opportunity to really rise up there on the Alabama depth chart. But there's also risk. We shouldn't negate that. That's certainly could be nothing, right? I mean, he is running as a starter, so that's reason for optimism. But yes, we shouldn't get ahead of ourselves sometimes with those big schools. And like you said, if you drafted the wide receivers from the Ohio State wide receiver core this last year, I mean, they all got pretty much nuked. The guys coming in this year, Noah Rogers, Brandon Innes, Carnell Tate, those guys are studs. And the kind of sad part about it is I don't even know that all 3 of those guys are going to hit. Like, they're all 3 great wide receivers, but is there going to be enough room for them? We don't really know. We thought that Julian Fleming was going to be a stud and flourish at Ohio State. And look at just what some injuries, bad luck, and maybe not being quite as good as the hype indicated. Look at what that's done to him. So even though we have 3 studs coming in to Ohio State, we can't guarantee or feel really safe with all 3 of them. You got to take your upside in this side of the game when you're playing Devy and C2C, though. So continue to take those shots out there, but try your best just to make sure that you're actually identifying high-end talent. If we go back to the quarterback position, I think that Cam Ward going from SCS to FBS last year, going to Washington State, like that was just, the hype was out of hand. Like, I don't know why it got so crazy. I was never into that. It's like, prove yourself at the FBS level before we just prop you up as a CFF and potential NFL stud. And Shadur Sanders, thankfully, people are kind of learning a little bit from that experience last offseason. But Shadur Sanders, yeah, I think people are learning. Just another example, though, that FCS to FBS jump, I mean, it's not a safe bet to make. Certainly there is some upside, though.
Yeah, and honestly, like Cameron Ward did better than I think I gave him credit for, but he did not do anything close to what people were like expecting from him. Because I kind of thought he was just going to be dead, but he was actually decent. But I mean, decent was not what people were kind of hyping him up to be, and so I give him a little bit of credit. But also, like you said, it was a little wild. There was a couple podcasts that will remain nameless that were really high on Cameron Ward. So
Yes, and the thing is too, it was a friendly system for him too, and he has not been looking very good at all, especially pushing the ball down the field. Apparently, this offseason in the spring, in the practices, the coaching staff is kind of frustrated with the lack of development from the things I've been hearing. But I digress. There's lots of examples that we could use, but we slightly illustrated there, or maybe we illustrated well, the volatility, the risk that comes with projecting who's next up on the college side. And I think that feeds into another narrative or pet peeve, whatever you want to call it, of folks who they just think that, okay, I'm going to trade away a stud on the NFL side. And I'm going to just get all this campus capital. I'm going to get all these Devy picks, and that's how I'm going to reload my roster. And it just doesn't really work to offload your NFL studs just for these Devy picks or just for unknowns. Like, I get it. If you're getting Caleb Williams, that's a totally different story. But if you're getting some lower down assets, a bunch of smaller C2C college assets, I just ultimately don't like that strategy. You're kind of tearing down an NFL side, which is very hard to build when you're talking about rookie and Devy picks to fill back in that NFL roster eventually. So I see that too often. People are not valuing their NFL assets enough. And I think from a narrative standpoint, it's just at least important to maybe exploit that if you are a manager in those leagues. But I think people will continue to get smarter and smarter, but there is an edge to be had.
Yeah, that one's really tough because you can never control how people trade or anything. And if anything, goes back to the old adage of, just be as active as possible, send as many offers as possible, and you can be the guy that's stealing from people. As much as you hate to say it, you don't want to be that guy. But if someone's going to be that guy, it should be you and not and not the other guy in your league. So yeah, it really is crazy though. I've seen some trades in my leagues and your leagues that you've sent me and other people sent me, and it's just like, at what point do you just say, oh, the campus and the Canton side are 100% even? I get that, like, you might split the pot evenly, the money might be even, like stuff like that. But I think that the main goal should always be to get players to the NFL part, because then if you're only focusing on the campus part, then you can only win 50% of the money. If you're focusing on both, now you can win 100% of the money. So like, yeah, they might be even, but you have to do things a certain way to get 100% of the money, or have the option of getting 100% of the money. And so it blows my mind when you see guys like like a Josh Allen going for like a Caleb Williams and a first or something like that, like a Devy first. And it's just like, okay, but he's already proven he's really not. I love Caleb Williams, but he's still in the Pac-12. Like it's not like he's going up against these amazing defenses every week or anything like that. So it's not impossible for him to fail. And that's probably not even a great example, because obviously there's worse examples of other players that have not done nearly as much of Caleb as Caleb Williams has. But
Absolutely.
it just seems like people are just so willing to get that youth. Oh, well, I got two players though. Like, I got a player and a pick, and it's like, well, yeah, but did you really help your team is the real question.
Yeah, I mean, the listeners will have to go and check out C2C's pod, because they also put out I think it was Devy debate episode this week, where they did go over some trades that people submitted, and there was one where it was like trading Jonathan Taylor away, and it was like Troy Franklin, Devin Neal, and a pick or something, and it just doesn't cut it, in my opinion.
That's a better
And
example, because that's
yeah,
more of what I'm thinking of. It's like literally no one is proven there. Like there's nothing proven. And then you have JT that had a down year, had the injuries. I don't care. Like, he was one of the best, running back prospects we've had in a while. He proved that he was a stud at the NFL level, like compared to the guys that could possibly be all third or fourth round NFL draft picks,
No, exactly. So something I guess for all of us to kind of keep in mind, and maybe that does shift some people's valuations of those players. I do want to pick your mind, I guess, while we're on this topic. Do you think that the bot or the payout, so the reward for winning the NFL side in a C2C league, should that be a little bit more money on that side compared to the college league, since it is so easy to rebuild? If you really wanted to win the college side every year, it could be feasible if you just wanted to punt your NFL aspirations and just, take all these CFF juniors, seniors, um, high end producers. So do you think that it's harder to win on the NFL side, harder to build a sustainable Devy roster with NFL assets? Should we be potentially getting more money for winning that side?
Yeah, I started out in two C2C leagues and they were both 50-50 split for the pot. And so that's all I've ever done. So I can't say that I've done it a different way to where I have like an actual experience here. And I even just put in my first C2C article on DLF that, like I think that the best way to do it is 50-50 split. And it's just because mostly like I want to keep everyone active in both leagues. But if you really start to think about it, and I didn't truly think about it until you just started questioning it, if you put the focus on the NFL side, you're still going to have the focus on the C2C, the campus part. I mean, because they have to get to the NFL side, to win that money. So even though maybe you're taking less money, maybe it's like a 65-35 split or whatever it might be, for the NFL side. I think that you'll still have everyone really active on the campus side because that's the only way that you're actually going to get these NFL players. So I hadn't truly thought about it until you just said it, and that's me being an inexperienced C2C player. But maybe I do like it better that way.
I've seen like a 60-40 or a 75-25 type split. I actually don't mind it. I guess I would consider that in future leagues, but like you just said, those are the leagues I've also played in for the most part, if I'm remembering correctly, the 50-50 split. But that's just because it's kind of the most popular. Doesn't mean that it's right, and there probably isn't a right or wrong. So if anybody's in the live chat, you chime in on that or shoot us a message if you have a strong opinion, because I think both of us are kind of curious to hear maybe more
Yeah.
arguments on that.
I'm
Yep.
I'm willing to change my mind on it. Like I even right now I'm going back and I'm like, you know what, but like you're still working on the campus side, you're still putting in the time. If anything, I might be putting in more time on the campus side. Now, of course, that's all going to benefit the NFL side eventually. But like it kind of sucks if it's like, oh, I'm only making, especially if it's a lower buy-in league. Like now, oh, I won the campus side. I won $100. Cool, like that's not as fun. So there's definitely some, like I said, I'm willing to change my mind. I don't have a strong opinion either way right now. But if someone has a strong argument, then I'm willing to listen to it.
Yeah, and I do like the format of having some sort of like an empire standings, which I know Levi Valentine, who um, we play with him in a couple leagues, and he's a commission of a C2C league, and it's kind of a cool concept of where you have your yearly winnings and all that, but some of the money goes to a cumulative pot. So it really does pay to be, you get points basically if you have success on the NFL side and if you have success on the campus side. So if you do well in both, you're going to get a lot of points, and that eventual payout, maybe 3-4 years into the league, is actually really large. And so that rewards you being quite productive on both ends. You can't just be only a college successful team, and you can't only win on the NFL time. Like both the campus and the Canton sides are valued in that type of a format, especially in the long term, which is kind of cool. That does incentivize you to have a good NFL squad and sustain it. So I guess for people looking for ideas for new leagues, I think that's an excellent way to run your dynasty league if you have time to kind of track some of the points that is associated with that cumulative pot and scoring format.
Yeah, and even going into the dynasty leagues or Devy leagues or whatever, like every single startup that I've done in the past 2 years has been an Empire league. Now, uh, some of them are like resetting Empire, where you actually reset, you redraft, and do all that kind of stuff. And then, but the ones that I've actually written the bylaws for and everything, it's just more of the money part, the money aspect, where you have a progressive pot, everything builds up, and then somebody wins it, over time. So of course that's not like completely changing your league at that point. It's just somebody wins a buttload of money. But like you can actually have it to where everyone redrafts. You start from scratch again, which can be fun. Everyone loves startups, and it's technically a new startup, but it's the same league. So you're not adding a league, but you get to do that, get that startup itch out of the way. So I love doing the Empire, whether it's C2C, Devy, or Dynasty. I definitely like doing that. Even like I said, even if you don't do the whole resetting, if you want to build your team your way forever, that's perfectly fine. You can still do the progressive pod and let somebody win a little bit extra money, that year, if they really do just completely dominate the league.
Yeah, no, I like it. But I'll ask you, John, are there any pet peeves? Are there any narratives that are either grinding your gears or just the things that you wanted to discuss?
Yeah, so this one's controversial, and I know, that's crazy coming from me, but I I think that the narrative that you're never going to get a quarterback cheaper in a Devy league or a Campus to Canton league or whatever. So you have to draft them, whether it's in your startup or your supplemental draft. And it's true. You're never going to get them cheaper. That's not the part that I'm arguing with. But how many failures do you have to have before you succeed, and you get that stud QB? And that's the real question. How many other players that you could have possibly hit on and then traded for a QB later on did you miss out on just by going QB early on? And the reason why I'm asking this is just think about how many QBs have failed, or at the very least not lived up to expectations, or not gotten on the field as quickly as we thought they were going to, or possibly not gotten on the field at all, had to transfer out, like all that kind of stuff. I mean, 5-star guys, 4-star guys, these stud players that were almost can't miss prospects, even like a Quinn Ewers or somebody like that. We still have a ton of question marks about him. He's going into his 3rd year. People were taking him at 101 overall in Devy startups, and now we're going into our 3rd year, and we have no idea if he's actually good or not. Now, obviously, you have to take QBs at some point to, you have to have QBs. Like you said, we're feeding our NFL squad, whether it's a Devy team or a C2C league. We're feeding that NFL squad. We have to get QBs at some point. But I'm just wondering if the argument on the NFL side for that everyone just says is we have no idea who's a good QB, who's not, like, which is bullshit. But if that's the argument everyone's gonna make, then why don't we just trade for them once we actually know that they're good? Even if it costs us a little bit extra, you know, we can draft so many other players that probably have a better chance of hitting that running back that we know, like, couldn't possibly miss, that wide receiver that scored 40 touchdowns last year in high school, in a senior year in high school, like those kind of guys. Maybe we go ahead and take some of those guys, profit, and then we take that profit and we go spend a little extra on a QB that's already hit.
Yeah, I like what you're throwing out there. And honestly, so a friend of the show, Devy Dietz, right? He's an analyst at C2C. He has said in the past, or he's tried to follow a zero QB approach, or at least prioritizing QBs a little bit later in the draft. He will put it off. And I think this is just C2C strategy. But I think that's being modified this year because of the talent coming in this freshman class. All those guys in supplemental drafts are going in the first, or at least, the top 3, 4, 5 guys. And I guess ultimately after that, I think it makes a lot of sense to be waiting, like you said. And if you get that confirmation at some point that that player's a stud, or that player could potentially be an NFL starter, things like that, yeah, pay up at that point once there's more certainty. Kind of like um, yeah, I mean, there's other positions that are like that, of course, but I think quarterback, that's a good point. So do you wanna pay for that uncertainty when the hit rate is so low, when you could get a Bo Nix? Like, I traded I It was like a pick swap type deal and a player swap. I don't remember the exact transaction of me acquiring him last year. It was pretty cheap. And if he ends up being, let's say, a day one NFL draft pick this next year, and I'm not saying that Bo Nix will, but there's a chance. And ultimately, like you got him so late, or you just traded for him for dirt cheap, or you picked him up on the waiver wire for pretty cheap in the season. Like there's a lot of ways to get solid quarterbacks. You look at Joe Burrow. I mean, Joe Burrow was just largely undrafted in C2C leagues that year that he truly broke out. Just was not on people's radars. So yeah, it's possible to get some of these NFL quarterbacks either cheap later in drafts and free agency, or like you said, pay up at a later date when there's more certainty.
Yeah, and I just think, if you look like even right now, you have Cade Klubnik as like the QB4, QB5 in a lot of people's rankings. And, we've talked about how we're not big fans of Klubnik in the recent past. And so it's just stuff like that. Like these QBs get pushed up so far. And obviously, like that's just talking about him being QB4, QB5. But even in like DLF's rankings right now, he's going off as the 20th person off of in Devy startups. Like that's just way too early. Like I there's so many other players that I would much rather take over Cade Klubnik that I truly, I mean, at the very least, or like the best way or the nicest way to say it is like he has major question marks, and so and a lot of these players do, but even more so, I think it's when we go to the extremes, like the Quinn Ewers, the perfect prospect going at 101 in Devy startups and stuff like that. That's when I start, questioning it, like, okay, let's calm down here. We have Bijan Robinson. We have like these players, these studs that we know are coming out this year or next year, like that kind of stuff. Like right now, you would talk about like a Rocket Sanders, a MHJ, like somebody like that is going to come out assuming health for obvious reasons, but we have to do that with every player. Then you take those players, and then once you run out of all those players that you're like, okay, I can almost guarantee that these guys are going to be NFL studs, then you start worrying about these QB prospects and all that. And that's more, I'm not saying don't ever take the QBs. I'm saying take them when they fall, and don't push them up just because, oh, this is the cheapest I'm ever going to get them. Well, yeah, when they fail, how cheap is that?
I'm with you there. I like what you're saying. So other things that are on your mind, Sean.
Well, God, do we have all night? Um,
Yeah.
um, I think that while I completely understand the freshman players, aren't going to be studs right away and all that kind of stuff. At the same time, I think that we need to start prioritizing the ones that do a little bit more than the ones that didn't, and I still don't see it enough. And then I've kind of already talked about that with Luther Bird and everything, so we don't have to go too crazy with that one. But then, like my biggest pet peeve is, what is it about the Devy community? And obviously I know what it is, but like I'm talking to the Devy community. Like we need to be better. And I'm being nice when I say we, because I'm very flexible when it comes to these players. We need to be better when we see players suck, and we need to change our minds quicker. Keishon Butte, I said all year long, is not a good player anymore. Doesn't mean he wasn't a good player at some point, but things change. He had multiple injuries. He had Achilles tear, whatever it was. Things change. We have to change our opinions at that point. We saw him not be good in college. After those injuries, we saw other players on the same team be better than him and Malik Neighbors, and yet people were still saying, no. Wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, whatever. It took the NFL Combine, him to have the worst NFL Combine in the history of NFL Combines, before people were finally like, oh man, he sucks. He's third round pick. Like, we have to be better about that. And he's not the only player. There's so many other players. We talked about Tank Bigsby all year long. Nope. Top 3 running back in this draft. Next thing you know, the combine happens. The people actually truly start looking at these running backs, and now Tank's in like the late second in these rookie drafts, where all you heard about was how he was like a top 8 pick or all throughout the entire season. We just have to be quicker about this stuff because all you're doing is hurting yourself. When you have these players, you can't sell Tank Bigsby right now, but you could have sold him 6 months ago. You could have sold him, 3 months ago, even. You could have sold Keishon Butte for a buttload, 6 months ago. So we got to be quicker. We got to be better. And I'm going to do my part. I know Aaron's going to do his part. We're, putting out rankings, all that kind of stuff to help people out. But, when we talk about these players that we think fell off or we think are rising, we got to be quicker. And not to say like go overpay for somebody or go sell somebody just because they had a bad game, but we got to react at some point.
And we received a listener question from at FF Dirty Mike last week, and that was primarily us deciding when we're out on a player. And like you said, you're a little bit faster to react or quicker to say you're out. Well, until you're back in, until they actually prove something more so. And I get that. And my argument was, each year that they don't do something, the more out we need to be, right? We progressively bump them down and say the likelihood of them actually becoming a great player is lower. So like you said, with Butte, it's kind of like after the injury, after he started doing not very much on his return, getting outproduced by Malik Neighbors at LSU. It's like, got to start inching him down consistently. Athletic testing is the latest blow to Butte if we're using that example. So I'm with you there. Yeah, we need to react, and I think that we still want to cling on to these guys just because of the pedigree and all the other reasons. So like you said at the very beginning, we get it. This is not a shot at everybody who plays Devy or C2C, but more so a thing that we do need to react. And for example, I see, we shouldn't rule out true freshmen quite as easily. I will say that's an area that I'm not quite as willing to move off yet. But like you said, you got to move them down. They're certainly not staying up there in the rankings. I'm trying to think last year's true freshmen. So you're talking about like Trevante Citizen, Miami running back, and Jaden Blue, Texas running back. Like a lot of people still have them pretty high, and I get that the offseason adjustment of rankings, everybody's at a different pace with that, how quickly they update their rankings. But those guys should be quite a bit lower. Like I don't think it happens fast enough, like you said. So to your credit, I think that is a good pet peeve and narrative for us to discuss.
Yeah, and like it can definitely hurt if you move off of a 5-star prospect because he didn't do something in his freshman year and then he blows up. You're gonna hate yourself. But honestly, because we've had this Luther Burden discussion so much that I've been actively trying to find someone similar to Luther Burden that I could go back and like actually make a comp to. Okay, this guy was completely terrible, but played the majority or the entire season his freshman year, but was terrible in all like efficiency metrics and all that kind of stuff, and then blew up and was an NFL stud after that. Not got drafted, not like got drafted in the 4th round or something like that, and is your wide receiver 3, like not those guys. I mean, like is the number 1 guy in the class. Like, a lot of people had Luther Burden. Does he go back to being that guy? I can't find it. I'm not saying it's not out there, but I've been actively looking for it and I cannot find a comp. Even if you look at the same exact offense so that we can say like, okay, same offense, same whatever. Dominic Lovett the year prior didn't do hardly anything. And then he blew up in year 2. And then we have Luther Burden and he does, very little. Well, Dominic Lovett had a better freshman season than Luther Burden, at least efficiency wise. And then he obviously dominated Luther Burden in year 2. But I don't think that Dominic Lovett is this amazing, prospect to where we think he's going to go be a 1st round, NFL draft pick. So even in that comparison, that doesn't make Luther Burden look very good.
Hey, what can I say? Us in the fantasy community, we cling to that upside or the outliers, I guess is another way to put it, right? We're gonna get the next Josh Allen. Anthony Richardson is for sure, or at least has a high chance. He has the highest upside. I see that a lot. Highest upside in the entire class over CJ Stroud, over Bryce Young, and I'm like, I don't know. I mean, the mental gymnastics for him to actually hit that, like there's a lot of projection there, like way more projection than what we should be comfortable taking him in the first round in rookie drafts. So I'm not saying never take the Anthony Richardson type guys, because we know that there's the exceptions. He's a pretty extreme example, right? If you're going off production at least. But the Jalen Hurts, even those guys weren't as bad, statistically by any means. But we love our outliers and the low probability guys who we can claim, whether it's tools or with Burden. I'm still holding out a lot of hope that it was more situation and trusting the talent. But like you said, there's reason for doubt.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not a true comp to Lovett or anything like that because obviously we know that he was more involved in the rushing game and stuff like that. Him being Burden, so it's not like a one for one comp. But like I said, I can't find it. I can't find that guy. Like people talk, oh, Jameson Williams, oh, this and that and whatever. Yeah, but Jameson Williams didn't get on the field because he had three studs ahead of him. He wasn't on the field the entire year, and that's where it really becomes a problem. But then of course you're going to come back and say, oh well, the offense sucked, the way they utilized him sucked, and all that kind of stuff. So I'm willing to be wrong on Burden. I'm looking for that comp to say, okay, this is where I can say, or at least someone similar, and I can't truly find it to where they went on to become a top 3 wide receiver in that class or something like that. I'm really struggling to find it. So it seems like for the most part, you're going to either not get on the field as a freshman, or if you do get on the field, you're going to be pretty good. You don't have to be amazing. You're going to be pretty good, decent. Josh Downs had 8 receptions in his first year, but he had 3 touchdowns on those 8 receptions. He showed us that he was a red zone threat. So we can look at stuff like that and say, okay, this is great. I didn't see that with Burden. It's just like beyond the touchdowns, like he had 8 touchdowns on the year, but most of those were rushing, I think. And it doesn't do it for me.
Yeah, right. You got to put a lot of faith in the profile of him coming out. But I think that we could talk about something that both of us can probably agree on, and it's just kind of the frustration. And this is more of a pet peeve than a narrative, but pet peeve of just college teams not giving us any information, like the lack of standardization for injury reporting in college. It's just a big issue. And it's something that we should talk about more because, who are the people who end up making changes? Well, if there's enough of the fans calling for, we need more information, we need teams to disclose these things. And I'm not saying the Devy Devotional is the podcast that's going to make all these changes, right? But more and more people talking about it. And I think that'll trickle on to other people who can actually make those changes. But anyways, it's just so frustrating when you're trying to find news on a player all week. Like, are they going to play? Things like that. And then they don't even suit up, or they're suited up, but the coaches had zero intention of playing them that game. Or they give them such a light workload that it doesn't matter if you had your auto subs set for your C2C league. If you have auto subs, they're only playing 10 snaps because that's what the coach said that they want to do that week. So I just think it's frustrating. There needs to be some accountability there in college. Just a pet peeve of mine.
Yeah, honestly, or unfortunately, I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. But I get venting about it because it does suck. It really does. I'm glad that I do have auto subs in my C2C leagues. Fantrax, you don't do a lot of things right, but you did that one right. So I do appreciate that. If you're in a C2C league and you do not have auto subs, you need to talk to your commissioner now during the off season and get it added in. It's not perfect. Like Aaron said, if somebody goes in and plays 1 snap, sorry about your luck, but that's just, you had a better shot of that with auto subs than he's going to do that no matter what. But if he played 0 snaps, now you get an auto sub. So, it's 1,000 times better. But on top of that, you don't have to try to follow along. I don't know about you guys. I'm busy on Saturdays and Fridays and Thursdays and Wednesdays and sometimes Tuesdays. So like I can't sit there and just try to figure out who the hell I'm starting, after I've already set my lineup for the week and possibly gone in and tinkered and all that kind of stuff too. So make sure you have auto subs. That's not a vent. That's just that's just me telling you, make sure you do it.
Yeah, that's a smart recommendation. So, if you got something out of the podcast tonight, hopefully you're able to convince your commish, or if you are commish, hopefully you're willing to make that change, that adjustment, now that some of the things are being worked out there at Fantrax as far as their auto sub options.
All right. We actually, we did pretty well. We didn't know how long this was going to go for. I don't know how long this one's going to go for, but my biggest pet peeve, the biggest pet peeve in all of Dynasty is, oh, well, if he gets the draft capital. Like, come on, guys. We have to start. I just talked about how we have to start changing our minds a little quicker about these players. We also have to start creating our own opinion on players. It doesn't have to be set in stone. I'm not saying you can't adjust it here or there, that kind of thing. But come on, guys. You gotta be able to have a little bit of conviction about a player beyond just if he gets draft capital, if he gets first round draft capital, if he gets third round draft capital. We gotta be able to do this. That's our big thing. That's why we're talking about it now. Like on the Devy Devotional, we talk about player values. We talk about players that we value, where we value them, how we value them, and all that kind of stuff. And so, what's the point of our podcast if we go, hey guys, we really like Bryce Young, we really like CJ Stroud, and then we go, but if Anthony Richardson gets first round draft capital, I know we've said he's terrible this entire time, but we got to be better than this, guys. Like I get it. There's always a point where you should draft every single player. Anthony Richardson does have an extreme amount of upside. And it's not just him. There's a million other people and players that have been talked about where if they get draft capital, that kind of thing. There's wide receivers in this draft class that if they get draft capital, this and that. No, I like these wide receivers, and I really don't care where the draft capital is as long as it's not 7th round draft capital. Then there's extremes, and like I said, you have to be flexible. But with Anthony Richardson, he was a tier 5 QB for me, pre combine, pre whatever. Now, with the combine, he's shown elite athleticism. I already knew he had it, but now I can actually put pen to paper and say, okay, he has elite athleticism. Okay, so now I add that to the thing. That maybe bumps him up a tier, maybe 2. It doesn't bump him up to tier 1. It just doesn't happen. And so I think that I've said in the past, like I'm willing to take him at the end of the first, maybe the beginning of the second. But I know I'm not going to get him there. But that's where you should take a player like that, those high upside players. That's where Lamar Jackson went in his draft. Justin Herbert went really late in a lot of his drafts because he was a senior. That's another one we can vent about. But I just think that you got to have a little conviction because how many of these players that did get first round draft capital have busted? It's the same argument I was making earlier with these other QBs and other players. Like just because they're the perfect prospect on 247 doesn't mean go draft them. Just because they get first round draft capital doesn't mean go draft them. But I think I've vented enough. How do you feel about it, Aaron?
I mean, obviously draft capital matters, and I don't think that we'll dispute it. However, like you said, the pre-draft analysis should not be littered with that. Like, try to have conviction, like you said, or at least, yeah, if you have a process that says this guy is good, say this guy's likely going to be a stud. Like this guy is one of the top tier of these guys pre-draft, and yeah, like you said, it's a kind of a cop out, right? It's an easy out if he gets draft capital. Yeah, I mean, I don't have much to add to it. I like a lot of the things that you said. Draft capital definitely is useful if you're looking in hindsight or if you just want to wait till post draft to make a lot of your rankings or adjustments. Like for example, I mean, if you're doing a rookie draft this summer, it's after the NFL draft. Yes, I mean, definitely you're going to factor in draft capital. It's like you and I said before, or we've said this in the past, like we can probably identify which players are good already without needing that first round draft capital that's out there. So we've already been doing it, but it gives people a little bit more confirmation and people kind of run with it. Like you said, they hype up some guys who got draft capital that they probably should not have, right? That's going to happen out there. Something that we can exploit. We can vent, and that's definitely a valid pet peeve, but people are just going to run with it every year. So might as well take advantage, I suppose.
Honestly, and that kind of goes back to another one of our points of, like every draft class is better than this one. And like whereas we lost some players, we lost Keishon Butte, who I think was a solid player before the Achilles injury or whatever it was. We lost Blake Corum. We lost a couple other players, and so there was even some QBs that I thought were going to come out that didn't. And so like, not saying that they were amazing, they weren't that top tier or anything like that, but those are still players that would have been in the mix, that kind of thing. So we did lose some players that we thought were going to be in there, but I don't think that changed it from this top tier elite draft to it's garbage, go trade for 2024. But what I love personally, and it has nothing to do with like the actual talent of the class, but what I love personally about this draft class is that a lot of people love the shitty players. And so it doesn't matter how many good players are in it, or if we lost a few players, because people are gonna go take the Anthony Richardsons, the Will Levis, and the Tank Bigsby's, and those players of the world. Jonathan Mingo is getting hyped right now as the next AJ Brown. So people are going to take all of these players, and I see it in mock drafts, and I see it in rankings and all that kind of stuff. And all you're going to do is profit if you focus on the quality players and take your mind and your eye off of draft capital a little bit. Then all you're going to do is profit. And once again, just like last year when I was saying this class doesn't suck, why is everyone saying this class sucks? I'm saying it again. This class doesn't suck. Why is everyone saying this class sucks? Draft the good players and you will be perfectly fine.
Well said. And that is some easy advice for everybody to follow. Draft those good players. I love it.
That's right. And Beth, we trust, baby. But
yes.
I think that's probably the best way to end it. I kind of got on my soapbox there, but hey, we have fun here. There, I get hyperbolic. I get, I get what's the word I'm looking for? Like lectury. That's not a word, but that's the word I'm going to use. But there's truths behind what I'm saying, and I really do think that like you can, whether it's in Devy or in C2C or in Dynasty or in rookie drafts or whatever, you can avoid certain misses by doing things the right way. And you can, if you have a good process, then you can avoid a lot of those misses. You're not going to hit 100% of the time. It's never going to happen, especially in Devy drafts, and especially in C2C drafts. You're lucky to get like 50%, but you could be 50% instead of 20%, and like all that kind of stuff. So in rookie drafts, you can be 75% instead of 50%. So there's definitely ways to do it. If you need help, slide into Aaron's DMs, slide into my DMs, check out the rankings, do all that kind of stuff. We're here to help, but I think that is enough of that. Good pod. I'm glad that I got to vent and get some stuff off my chest. Aaron as well. But you have any words of wisdom for us before we get out of here?
Oh, John, we're all feeling better now, right?
I'm feeling a lot better. So I don't know about you. I don't know about the listeners. I'm feeling a lot better. We appreciate you guys listening. We'll be back in a couple of weeks, hopefully with, I don't know, maybe more venting. Who knows? We'll just have to wait and see. But until then, we're going to go ahead and cash out. See you guys.